Well, I'm excited to be joined today by Jackie Brewster, and we get to talk about the difficult topic of self-awareness.
Yes.
And I have the chance to work with your husband quite frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And Stephen, he helps with musicians and church worship teams all around the world, different types of worship teams. He helps us with River Valley Worship. And so we consider you guys a part of our family in many ways. Although you don't live in Minneapolis, you're here a lot and you're here now. And we're so glad. And so thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. And I'm excited to be in your state because I want to see all the states. So I was like, oh.
Have you been to Minnesota before?
No.
Oh, really?
No, this
well,
is
welcome.
my first. Thank you.
You can check it off the list.
I can. I have like a map that I scratch it off.
So what states are left?
The Midwest.
Okay. Really, well,
All
for
of
me,
it.
it's the opposite. I think I have 7 states left, like Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and then I've driven into Idaho and out of Idaho, just the sign, but I don't count that.
Nope.
So,
no. Steve will count flying in.
Right.
He's like, we've been to the airport. I'm like, no.
No, I don't do that.
I need to
At all.
Yeah,
That doesn't count.
No.
Well, I'm glad we've come to common ground right away already.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we could check that off for you. That's exciting. And I hope you're back again. Hope you don't just check it off and never come back.
I would like to come back. Yeah.
But you do a lot of coaching. You help a lot of people in the area of self-awareness. You've written books. You have a podcast yourself. Dive us in. When it comes to self-awareness, it's like I'm only as aware as I am right now. And so how do I become more aware of who I am and what I should do in order do I need to change? Am I good? Where do we start?
I love this question. So self-awareness, you've got to really be interested and curious, I think, like, why do I do what I do? So it really starts there. I think that, it's so broad. I feel like it can go all over the place. So kind of narrowing it in is like, I want to be self-aware in what area. Maybe that's where you start. I use some different modalities. The Enneagram is one of the tools I use. As far as personality typing system, it gives me a great point to jump off into somebody's story. And I really am passionate about helping people uncover and discover more about themselves through this tool and several other modalities as well.
Yeah, and the Enneagram, I mean, in the church, if you search on YouTube, like Enneagram in the church, there's a lot of differing opinions. And I've watched a ton of different videos, and I kind of am one of the people who finds myself, I understand why they think that way, and I understand why others do. And I found it to be a helpful tool in how I relate to people. But I totally understand why people feel the other way about it. Again, in this conversation, I think just my posture on it is, I think we can learn something from it. And again, for those who are listening, if they feel differently, again, there's other videos they can check out on that. But I've found it to be helpful and put language maybe around what I've always felt.
Yes.
I understand there's maybe a perspective of like, oh, we don't want to put our identity in that. But I've just never found myself doing that. So,
and it's not, I think that understanding, or the way that I use it anyways, and the practitioners that I glean from, and
you're a Christian, right?
And I am a Christian. Yes. Should I say, yes, I'm a Christian.
Hopefully on this podcast, talking church, but yeah.
Yes, I am. And so when I think about the Enneagram as a tool for self-awareness and growth, it's really like beginning to understand the why behind behavior. So it looks at the motivation, not behavior. If you're just looking at it and you're like, I just want to use this as a tool for me to kind of get labels, I always say, like, this is not a label maker. So it's not like, don't put labels all over yourself. Don't make sticky notes and say, well, like, I'm an Enneagram 7, the enthusiast. So this is who I am. So it justifies my behavior.
Right.
That's not the true use of the Enneagram. It is like, what am I doing? So it gives us great self-awareness around, like, what am I doing? It kind of like almost like smacks you in the face on some of it. So I feel like when you find your number, your type, if you're going to use this modality, that it should sting, it should feel uncomfortable, and it should also feel like, oh, I feel seen, I feel known, but we don't want to stop there because that's just, it's just the beginning of the journey. So how I view this is when we understand why we do what we do, then we can understand where we get stuck, and then we can understand where we need to surrender. And that's the Christ part of it, like surrendering those parts of ourselves that we have taken on, that it's our responsibility to fix ourselves. So we see in that average range of personality, fear, worry, and afraid come in to the picture. And then that's most of the time how people function as far as like, this is just who I am. And I'm like, no, 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 this is not just who you are. These are patterns of behavior that have been developed as early as the age of 2 for you to try to figure out how to get love, how to get your needs met, and how to keep yourself safe. So when you begin to understand that this is not who you are, this is just patterns of behavior, we keep it away from ourselves a little bit. We can look at it and be like, oh, is this getting me what I want? Is this really helping me achieve my goals? Or is there a better way? So that surrender piece is so important.
100%. And I think there's a ton of different modalities and tests and things that I think all try to put language to what you're experiencing and how it can be helpful. And I love what you mentioned about the identity piece. Ultimately, our identity is rooted in Christ. And
That's
I think the answer to everything we need is in Scripture. I think where the traits and maybe the health indexes of other things are just putting language to what obviously we see. When you look at somebody who's maybe saying, okay, I'm using a tool and I'm leaning into this, but how do I know if I am in a healthy part of who I am? Like in my discipleship, in my Bible reading, and all of these things. But as I'm reading this, it's putting language to it. How do I know that where I'm at is the right spot? And again, I think people would say, well, just do what the Bible says. But sometimes I feel like I am, but I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the Bible is like the bread of life, right? So we need it. We need it every single day. We need it to renew our minds. We need it. We also need to reflect on why we do what we do. So we have to take ownership of our own lives.
It's like Paul. He's like, I don't do what I want to do,
right?
But I want to do what I don't do,
right? And it's like, but why?
Yeah.
But why? And so I work with people day in and day out on the why. Like, what is tripping you up? And I work with a lot of people in ministry, and it's trying to like get them realigned. A lot of it, it's kind of like, I'm frustrated, or I'm trying to do this, or I'm in leadership and I'm so confused by the team dynamic, and and it's really like, okay, slow it down. Let's figure out what's going on. How are you feeling? Let's register what's going on, and then let's look at the bigger picture, because within this system, so if we look at the Enneagram system, there's 9 personality types, and that doesn't mean that we pigeonhole into these nine beings, right? But it gives us a framework, and inside of that, there's subtypes.
You got to cap it somewhere.
So right, but inside of that, there's subtypes. So there's really 27 different ways that people show up, and we look at.
Is that the wings?
No, it's subtypes.
So that's
it's
different.
Self-preservation, social, or one-to-one. And it has to do with your fight or flight response. It has to do with survival. It has to do with how you learned early on in your life to get your needs met, to get love, and to keep yourself safe. So when I am thinking about self-awareness and growth, whether you use this modality or you don't, I want to look at how are you getting your needs met? How are you getting connection and love? And how do you think you're keeping yourself safe? And so whether you use this modality or not, if you start to reflect on your life, if you write those 3 down in a journal and you start to pay attention to that day in and day out, how am I getting my needs met? I'm demanding, I'm pushy. I don't let people tell me no, So that might be a personality, right? That might be part of it. Or it's like, how do I get my needs met? I'm people please. Like I try to figure out what people want, and then I try to meet their needs, hoping that it comes back to me.
Right.
How do I keep? There's I won't go through them all, but we can see how that how do I get my needs met? How do I keep myself safe? And so we're going to have all different ways of doing this. So how do I keep myself safe? I'm cautious. So I am like super adventurous, and I'm also very, very cautious. And so I want to plan, and I want to look and see and make sure that things are going to line up right. I want to make sure I have all the resources that I need. That when I travel with my husband, he like doesn't care about eating and things like that. So I put snacks in my bag, so I know I have what I need. And he's very different than me. So you start to pay attention to that for yourself.
Right.
And then as far as like, how do I get love? That's a really, connection. So maybe it's not love, but maybe it's even connection. How do I seek connection in my relationships, intimate relationships, and also friendships and work dynamic? So if you can just even take those 3 questions and start to dive into why do you do what you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that you start to see patterns, right?
Yes.
Of, oh, wow, that thing affected me, there's a lot of conversation right now around childhood trauma and, we don't have time to get into all of that, I'm sure, but how it wires your brain. And, you know, to me, I think all those things, they speak to God's creation, like how important that is. And I mean, I was reading an article the other day just about the things that happened between ages like 2 and 7, just the importance of what happened in your life. And from language, I mean, I saw a girl who spoke like 7 languages. She's 5 years old, and just you can retain it like that. But that also on the toxic side, if you have all these negative things, your parents were addicted to drugs or you were verbally abused, that can also stick with you for a really long time. How do you, I mean, if you look at those things, you take inventory of those things, let's say they're not what you want them to be,
right?
You know, then where do you go?
Yeah. I mean, I do a ton of that work with people is the why, and the why do we do what we do? It starts really early on, us trying to figure out how to get these needs met. And, you know, I do a lot with attachment theory. So how you learn to attach early in childhood is then how you try to attach all through your adult relationship. If you don't know this, then you don't know. You're blind to it. You don't, and then you parent in that same way. So how you were parented, I'm going to do it different. Unless you do something different, you're not going to do it different. Right. So patterns of behavior repeat, okay, unless you stop them somehow. So we repeat what we don't repair. And so you see that through generational trauma. You see, you know, we'll talk about the generational curses. We'll talk about that, and it's scientifically proven. It's like we pass things through DNA. So it's. I love that science and faith collide here. That it's true that we pass things on.
Yeah,
so
the dispositions and like, I mean, we just had a couple months ago a person who struggled with alcoholism. And he's like, well, my dad struggled with it. I struggled with it. And of course that can be broken. Again, don't want to say Absolutely. It's like, well, sorry, that's the cards you were dealt, but it maybe is the situation that you find yourself in.
Familiar.
Yeah.
What is familiar, we go back to, even when it's not healthy. And so, you know, when I'm looking at patterns of behavior with my people day in and day out, we're working on something, you know, we're seeing some growth, and then we slip back into something familiar. And so it's like, oh, okay. They bring it to me. They're like, man, I don't know how we ended up back in that fight. Like, this is crazy. But it's familiar. So we just go back to like, well, it's familiar. How did you get there? And then you didn't go all the way back to baseline because we've done enough work you caught yourself in the middle of it. Okay. So I always say self-awareness takes time. And it's about 3 to 6 months of kind of observing yourself. Like, why do I do what I do? You observe. Around the 6-month mark, I feel like you can then be like, I'm about to act out again. Like, I'm about to do it. I'm about to say that thing. Like, you catch yourself before you do it. That's self-awareness.
Aware.
Because you're aware. But it takes time. It does not happen. Oh, you don't read one post on social media and suddenly become self-aware. You don't read one book, listen to one podcast. None of that is true. You have to activate the information in your life for it to be real change.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I watch so many motivational videos on YouTube, and then I'm ready, like, yeah, I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to do all that thing. Yeah. But the pattern of change doesn't happen. With the clients you work with and different people, is there a point that again, that awareness you're talking about, but is there once you start seeing it, what are the patterns that then start to happen again? Is it just, again, oh my goodness, I needed that other person? Sometimes you just have to have someone else share it to you. You know, if you're married, usually your spouse can say, why did you do that?
Right.
Oh, I don't know. But is there a theme you see with people you work with of where they start to actually move from, okay, I'm aware of my differences. And I think most of this probably applies for people listening, working with teams. And I want to get to that after this, because a lot of personality situations and team building is all about relationships with others, but it starts with our relationship with ourselves. And I was sharing with you the book Leadership and Self-Deception, which if anyone has not read that, I'd recommend it. But what's that point and pattern to where you start to see, okay, I'm aware, then where do you, how do you know you're getting again, this is the performance, but like wins in your self-awareness?
What I've witnessed, and again, all different types of people, right? So I've got my really driven that are like, tell me how to fix it, I'm going to fix it. And I'm like, well, we can't fix too fast. So if we
That's how I am. Like the test, I'm like a 3, 4, and I'm like, I just tell me what to do and I want to get done.
Right. And so we have to work on slowing it down a little bit, and that it's not behavior modification, but heart transformation. Okay. And that takes time. So sometimes it starts with a behavior modification, but we want the heart transformation to kick in. We want you to want to change, not just change to make somebody happy or because that's what's said and that's what leadership looks like. Like healthy leadership looks like this, but if it's not authentic to your type of leadership, you can't sustain that. So it's really beginning to see the pattern. And then if it's a pattern that needs to be changed, not everything needs to be changed. So if it's a pattern that you're like, okay, in my leadership, I drive like you would be a driver. So I drive really hard. I'm like, we're going to do all the things laid out in front of me. And my team, I feel like I'm dragging them behind me. Man, they are not like, why can't they? I want them to run ahead of me. Like I gave them direction, go, but I'm not finding myself having a team that does that. Then it's slowing it down and recognizing, okay, it's got to be a me thing, not a them thing, leadership. Then it's, what am I missing? So let me get curious about myself in it, right? And so you start to see like, I thought I was leading them and that they all shook their head in that meeting and that they said yes. But if I really am honest, I looked around that room and I saw a couple deer in the headlights, and you start to recognize my leadership style is not working for everybody in the room. And you adjust. Instead of making them adjust to you, you begin to adjust and say like, okay, a couple of you guys, I feel like you've got it. And a couple of you guys, I feel like you're looking at me like it's not clear. So do you see what I mean? Like it's ownership of self. And so then you begin to adjust and attune to the other people involved in the conversation.
Yeah. To me, it's the follow-up of self-awareness is that the only thing that I can do is I can do something about it. I can't change other people, right, and I can't make them, in an employee situation, maybe like I could force them to do something, but that's not going to get you into a place you want to get. Right. You can manage them out of the job, right, if you want to.
Absolutely.
But I think that if you want to lead people to where you're going, right, you have to reflect. I do it all the time. I wish I did it more and I wish I did it better. I listening back to the podcast, sometimes I go, oh, I wish I would have said that. But most of us don't have microphones in our meetings to where we can listen back on how we handle it. Or it's like that Progressive commercial where they like throw the flag and they're like, let's watch back what actually happened. It's like, oh, if only we had that sometimes and we could watch ourselves and go, I actually kind of was a jerk there, or I kind of didn't. No one was paying attention, but I thought they were locked in. Yeah. And I think that's a huge step for sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that when you're asking about the self-awareness, I think it's that you, with the self-awareness over the course of time, if you're really digging in to learn about yourself, then you know your missteps. And so you start to see it play out and you're like, ooh, I don't like that happened. Like with my girls, we were recording something at my house. And so my husband was out of town. It was happening the next day. I was trying to get everything ready. And the girls were, they were 13 at the time. And so they're like at the kitchen bar and they're like talking and laughing and whatever. And I'm like, everybody just needs to stop, And they're like, what is wrong with her? And I recognize like, they're not doing anything wrong. I don't like the way that this is making me feel because I feel stressed about the situation. And so I was able to take the ownership. So I was like, hey girls, I'm so sorry that I overreacted. I'm going to eat dinner in my room because I feel overstimulated. I feel overwhelmed. And so I was able to own, instead of react, I was able to own it. Now, my initial was react,
right,
and then I was able to backtrack. I can catch myself now, even before that, and say like, I don't like the way this is making me feel, but nobody's doing anything wrong. It's just me.
So there's a book, H3 Leadership by Brad Lomenick, and I think that's where it's from, but I've heard him talk about this, where his team called him Darb because his personality, he would get angry with them, and it just was challenging to work with. And he finally had his team confront him and say, hey, we actually joke behind your back and call you Darb instead of Brad because we know that's not who you are, but you will be angry with people or just not really fun to be around. So we kind of all avoid you. And to his credit, he put in a book and had the self-awareness to realize that. But I think for many, they don't necessarily have that person to come up to them. And many of these situations, the whole point of it is team dynamics, right? When you're with yourself, if you're eating bad junk food or if you're doing drugs or whatever, sure, maybe you need self-awareness by yourself.
Right.
But by and large, self-awareness is most important with emotional intelligence and working with other people.
Absolutely.
Knowing that you're going to work with people who have different personalities, who have different characteristics, who have different needs, different childhood situations, how do we then approach a group of people that has, again, you shared about that with the team, but there's a group of people that all have different things.
Right.
What are the best tools and ways that I can approach it or that people can approach to working with people of all different backgrounds in a group setting and then maybe in an individual setting? If you say, well, I'm not really a challenging person. I don't like to be challenging.
Right.
And then somebody else is like, well, I am that way. You need to challenge me. I love a challenge.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's really difficult. If you've got a leader that is not a challenger and an employee that wants to be challenged, that's a hard one for sure. But I do think that what it comes down to is self-awareness of your own self. Like you cannot give to other people what you are not willing to give to yourself. So if you can't give yourself permission to understand you, you're not going to give other people permission to understand themselves, or you're not going to have any grace for somebody else. So I think the work starts with you. It's always individual work first. We've got to it's like the flight attendant. You've got to put your mask on first. Okay. You got to do your work first. Once you do your work, what I have found is that I think it's Christ. I think it really is that as I have witnessed myself and then have gone to the word, I think there's been conviction of my own life, right? There's just conviction. And then out of it, there's like this empathy that happens. Like, I'm a mess. So how can I expect all these other people to be okay? So I think that asking the Lord to give me eyes to see people through His lens is a huge part of it. So it's the empathy piece. Okay, I think that that's what's required in jobs today is an empathetic approach where we are willing to see other people where they're at instead of like making them be who we think that they should be. Instead, we're like,
That's how it was for a long time.
Right, forever. And then your generation, your sweet generation, is like, hey, we're not going to do this. And we're like, oh, hold up, wait a minute. These kids are changing. You're not a kid, you're an adult. But, I think it is your generation that changed the script and how we're going to do this. There's a requirement. So when I'm working with leadership in their late 40s, 50s, 60s, a lot of the conversations are around understand you and then understand the people around you. And so that's why the tools, different modalities, whether you use Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or anything like that. The only thing that I will say the Enneagram offers that the other tests don't offer is a growth track. So with Enneagram, we're not saying this is who you are, now go live it out. We're saying, hey, this is how you present. Let's look at the why. Let's get below the surface. Let's really do some deeper work. The other tests, they don't really offer a growth track. It's really like, this is your strength. Strength finders, or there's all kinds of great ones out there right now. So those are great tools, but not if you're going to pigeonhole people. It's not a great tool.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's where some of the criticism would come in is like, well, no, the growth track is in Christ. And to me, I think it's obvious. Yes, that is the answer.
Right.
I think where I'm at and obviously where you're at, it's like, yeah, it's both.
Right.
Like
It's both.
if the growth track of a personality test trumps your time with the Lord, then obviously it's not helpful.
Right.
And it's an idol. But if it's a helpful tool in the midst of what you're going through,
well,
what maybe can you describe like what that would look like?
Yeah, let's say this. So yes, your growth track is Christ, but if you don't know what you're trying to grow from, I don't know how, like, if I'm not aware, then I don't know what I'm trying to grow from.
Right.
So when I pray, I'm like, I don't want God to just take things away. I want to know what He's taking away so that I know if it comes back. You know what I'm saying? There's a pause to it for me.
I think you can hold that nuance in your mind and understand it. Yeah.
There's a pause for it for me as far as like on that growth track. Like what is holding me back? As a 7, when I am not, if I'm thinking through that personality type and that unhealthy range or that average range scattered, like I get nervous about like, oh my gosh, what if I'm not going to have my resources? So let me figure out how to have all the resources. Let me gather all the things to myself, and so then gluttony is the signature sin for this number. And so it's like gathering all the things. So if I'm in a gathering place, I have to pause. Like, am I not trusting that the Lord has everything I need? And then that's where it's like, okay, let me surrender that to you, Lord. Like, I think that I am trying to do this whole world all by myself. I'm trying to do this life by myself. So I feel like if you use this tool as a Christian, it gives you insight to understand what you're trying to do on your own so that you can go before him and say like, hey, I keep picking it up and I want to put it at your feet and I just get scared. So that's, that's my personality type. There's other things that other people struggle with, but
when it comes to like relationships with people, and again, I know I'm not the expert on this, but when it comes to relationship with others, there's a lot of things written by different people about then how this is how they relate to these people. This is how they relate to these people. Maybe are there a couple examples that you can think of that are helpful or most common? You mentioned like the challenger and the non-challenger. Is somebody that is, I'm at work and I don't feel like you're challenging me enough. Or the opposite. Maybe you're the employee and you feel like my boss just keeps challenging me all the time. But I don't know that that's how I do it. Some people, they love to be yelled at in the mirror. It's like the military thing. Like, come on, you could do it. Like, let's go. And other people if you did that, I would quit and I'd never want to be here again.
Right. Oh my God. So I feel like, oh my gosh, there's so many things going through my head right now. There's 3 different positions. There's an assertive type that is like, I'm going to stand independently and I'm going to push against and I'm going to go after what I want. Okay. So when you're thinking about team dynamics, so if you got an assertive leader or people that are assertive on your team, they're going to stand independently and push against. You're going to feel some resistance. You're going to feel some drive. You're going to feel a lot of like get up and go with this particular group of people. And it's good. Okay. We like that. They sometimes feel like everybody else should be like them. Okay, this is the group that's like, come on.
No pastor has ever said that.
None. This is the group that's like, come on, let's go. This is where we're going. If you can't handle it, whatever the sayings are. Okay. Then there's another group of people that they take longer to process. They withdraw. They have to pull away, think about it, process it. How do they feel? What do they agree with? Are they on board? Do they want to do it? Okay. Now the assertive people are like, why does it take you so long? Or why do you have to do that? But that's how these people process information. And so there's not a right or wrong here. Okay. There's just differences. And then there's another group of people that they're compliant. They move towards, what am I supposed to be doing? What do you guys expect of me? I guess I just need to shake my head and say yes to this. And so there's a lot of pressure with this type of this grouping to just conform and do and be. And so now that doesn't mean that they don't feel frustrated or they don't get bitter or any of those things on the back end of it. Usually they do because they feel like they have to say, yes, let's go to it. So there's 3 different groupings. And in a team dynamic, you're going to feel the pressure that happens inside of this, and a lot of conflict that happens inside of that. So if you don't know what's happening, it's like, I don't know why that person always looks like a deer in the headlights in our meetings, or I don't know why that person never speaks up. Well, they just need more time, or this person said yes, that they're on board, and then I get an email afterwards that says like, hey, I think I need more details, or I'm not sure I can do that. So, the assertive one is different because like I'm assertive, you're assertive. We're going to be much more get up and go, let's go. We'll just, take it as it comes. But when you look at the dynamics of the team, you're going to see like, if I try to lead everybody the same, I'm going to get frustrated. Yeah, and they're going to get frustrated.
You think about it in marriage too, and I'm sure my wife, listening to this is nodding her head saying, oh yeah, that's why I want details on what door I'm going to go through. And if you're saying, just come to church whenever and just come to the green room and just see us. Well, what if you're not there and where am I going to sit? And well, why does it matter? We'll figure it out. Well, because for me, that is not a helpful situation to just go to any door and figure it out. I want to know exactly where I'm going. And it's, oh yeah, maybe that's a little bit of awareness.
Right.
I also think, I don't know why I thought of this, but when you were describing assertive and the third one, you said the
compliant.
I was like, that's where cults get started. You have like an assertive person and then compliant. We watched the Netflix doc, I think it was Netflix, about the like dance cult situation.
Yes, right.
And yeah, like crazy. One of those guys just liked one of our Instagram posts of Talking Church. So, I mean, he's alive, but it's so interesting to just see that. And of course, there's probably another side to that they would say, and I'm not trying to get into the position there, but I just had watched that recently. And you look at, well, how could these people go along with that? And I think in the church, again, not in the cult situation, but even in church, how could people have a bad manager? And how could they serve such a toxic leader or whatever it is? Well, because they're compliant and they're assertive.
Right.
And I'm sure there's some safety in that, like familiarity almost of, well, just, I mean, they're leading us where we need to go. They take care of our needs.
Right.
They get the food. Kind of, they're the ones that go out and kill the animal and bring it back.
Right.
And so that can be a dangerous place to be for sure.
Yeah. I think it's, if you don't know, so that compliant can lean into people pleasing, you know, the assertive can lean into like control and manipulation. We can definitely do that. And then the withdrawn, isolation. You know, so there's negatives to all the positives, right? But in a healthy culture, you've got a driver, you've got an assertive person leading. Not every team has an assertive leader, but usually you've got some assertive people on your team. But inside of it, in a healthy culture, there's attunement. So there's a willingness to understand yourself and then to look around at the team and be like, okay, these people function different. Like Steve and I are, you know, the way that our business is set up, we've got different people that work for us. And so we've got an assertive guy. That's awesome. He's great. He's like easy and he's going to run with us. He'll run as fast as we want to run. Then we've got another guy that he does not want to run that fast, but he's really great with details. And he needs spreadsheets and all the things that Steve and I are not great at is what this guy needs from us. But we know that about him. So do we sometimes get frustrated as assertive types? Yes. But we have an understanding around like, okay, this is how he functions best. And so, you know, when you understand the people on your team, I think that it helps you to not be so frustrated. And not just as a leader, but even you know, I work with leaders, but I also work with people that work under the leaders. And so having the conversations around what do I do when I have a leader that doesn't understand me? Well, you can only control you. So what do you need to know inside of this? And how can you communicate to your leader? You know, with our assertive types, if I've got withdrawn individuals that I'm working with, you've got to tell them how you need communication to happen. And most of the time it's like they need an email and they need time. So they're not going to be able to fly like we fly. And so it is like learning how to be able to communicate and hopefully having leaders that are sensitive to that and that they're willing to understand that it's not their way or the highway. It's a team that's going to work together cohesively.
And I think in the church, this is so important because there's a lot of there's young people in every profession, but I think specifically in the church with social media, with a lot of these areas, the church is probably behind in these areas. And I think that they're starting to lean into more younger people and trying to help them, older pastors that want to learn more about these areas. And I would say, at least in my experience, seeing at our conference and different meetings I'm in, there's just a lot of young people that are wanting to be in ministry. You have internship programs, you have schools of ministry that are less, you go to the university, but more you learn while you're here, more apprenticeship style. And so I think there are more just young people involved, and you have these leaders that are saying, I don't know how to deal with this. But even that language that you were talking about, I think that being overly assertive, I think, is oftentimes praised among assertive people, and it becomes this. I don't think maybe echo chamber is the right word, but it's like, no, be more assertive, but just fix them, get them better, get them in shape. And when you're around those type of people, it's you kind of feel stupid if you don't do that. Well, of course that's what you do. Again, it's that drill sergeant mentality.
Right.
When reading the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, it was interesting. Everyone recommended that book, and I hadn't read it, for a long time, and everyone said, read it. And it was actually way more analytical than I thought. I thought there was going to be more story-based. But he kind of described how everyone thinks the charismatic, assertive leader is the one that leads a great company. And what he actually uncovered is it's more of the person who went in isolation, or not that needed the processing time, and that was more willing to let other people lead. And so I actually wonder in pastoring, at least where we're at, we're kind of in the era a little bit of the more assertive, charismatic leader. And I think that transitioning over, people don't need to become the leader that got them there. You need that barbarian attitude that got you off the ground, that planted the church, that grew you. But I think for many people taking over, they feel this pressure to become that person. And I think that might not actually be what the organization needs right now.
I would say that type of leadership is not what this generation is looking for at all. And so they want authenticity. They want emotional EQ. They want you to understand. Man, they want you to try to put yourself in their shoes and things like that. I hear it. I think when I've got a pastor that I've worked with for the past couple of years, and he is late 50s, I think. And his leadership's solid 8, solid driver, high achiever, like Iron Man's, all kinds of craziness that he does. I'm like, I don't even know what you're doing to your poor body, but he's just like going to go for it, And then his leadership style was that for a really long time. And then he was like, hey, I need you to help me. And so it was some really hard conversations around self-awareness and growth. What does this look like? Old patterns that he's like, but this is it. And I was like, well, is it getting you what you want? He's like, it's not. I'm like, well, what does it look like to surrender, to understand that you don't have to lead like that? If we look at Jesus, he didn't lead like that. He didn't lead his people like that. It wasn't with an iron fist at all.
They wanted it. They're like, we're ready.
But they didn't. That's not how he chose to do it.
Totally.
And so if we are supposed to walk life out through Christ's ministry, then that just doesn't make sense to me. So with him as an 8, talking through it all, and then watching him adapt in his leadership to the staff, and then him allowing me access to his staff to understand his staff better, and then he would say, hey, I need you to have a meeting with me and so because I need them to understand me. Can you help them understand me as a leader? I was like, I can help you do that. So there's a lot of points in his willingness to own his strong leadership, to understand that it wasn't working with the young staff that he has. His staff is young. And then his desire to learn how to attune and also continue to push and challenge and grow his people. But he had to do it in a way that wasn't going to crush them, but was going to push them. Does that make, or I don't know, I don't even know that I would say that he's like behind them, pushing them. He's more alongside, trying to understand them. And so watching him do this has been amazing. I have loved watching him lead.
My father-in-law described that to me when I was dating my wife, and he said, you're a lead out in front type of person. And he said, there's going to be times where you need to be stand in the back and be that shepherd as in the back as well. And I've just always been that way. My dad's that way. And he's like, let's go. Like, what's behind that bush? Let's chop it down and let's go. But there's other times you need to be behind and say, I need you. Why don't you, which way do you want to go? What path are you going down? I think it's for people like me, it's that conversation was, well, that's dumb. Why would I do that if I can just lead from the front, and it's not that I changed who I am completely, but I do think that it's understanding and recognizing is, especially with the younger generation, but is this a time where I need to lead from the front and show them how to do it? Right. Or is this a time where I need to step back, let them fail, come in if I need to, or who knows, maybe they'll succeed in a way that you didn't expect, And I think one of the hardest parts of self-awareness, as we kind of close this conversation, I feel like I could start a bunch of different rabbit holes, but then it's going to lead us down places. And I feel like we're coming to a good end here. But when it comes to self-awareness, it's what happens if they do it better than me?
Ooh.
What happens if they're actually a better preacher, a better person to lead a meeting? I was teaching a breakout at our conference, and I said, what if you're not the person who should lead that meeting? What if just because you're the leader doesn't mean you should be the meeting leader? We've done that here at River Valley, where usually it's one of the coordinators, and they are a project manager, and they're the ones actually leading the meeting. It's not, very rarely is Pastor Rob, myself, any of our lead team members leading a meeting, I'd say the larger the meeting, the less likely they're actually the ones leading the meeting. Well, and that positions you to give your feedback when needed, but well, we need to run a meeting this way. We did a brainstorm idea. I don't know who came up with it, but we have this whole brainstorm kind of plan that we do where we write all these different things, what we're looking for. Here's what went well, here's what was confusing, what was missing last time. And then when we go into brainstorm, well, that didn't come from Pastor Rob. That didn't come from me. That came from our creative team. And now that's the way we use it. But I think that is a fear of a lot of people. Well, what happens if I give them that opportunity and they're better? Or maybe they're not better today, but they have more potential than me. And I think more pastors they want that. But it's more of an inner fear. It's not one that they want for themselves.
So that's self-awareness, okay? That's the ugly side of why. That is the ugly side of why. Why would you not let somebody run the meeting because of fear that they would be better, right? So that's the ugly side of self-awareness, looking at the why, and then the surrendered side to that is like, okay, Lord, I'm going to lay it down because this isn't about who's better. This is about your kingdom. And this is about me recognizing other people's gifts and talents and helping them to grow and achieve and move all the, up, up, up. So I think that the work that I do with people is not pretty and it takes time. In the self-awareness, we start to see the reasons why we do what we do and that we grip what we grip. And then when we have an opportunity to release it, will we do it? Will we do it? And that's growth. When you can do it, when you can release it, then you know you've grown.
So good. Well, it's a great place to end. It's like the ending point, but the starting point is something totally brand new. And Jackie, it's been a privilege to talk. And people want to learn more about you. Your Instagram is Enneagram JB, is that right? And your website?
Enneagram JB.
Oh, same one.
Yep,
same
everything.
one. So if you're interested in learning more about that, but you've helped us today far beyond a modality or personality test, but just being aware of who we are as leaders. I couldn't think of something much more important as a leader of people in the people business, for lack of a better term, than to being aware of who you are. Right. And again, we didn't even get into congregation and all that stuff. There's so many factors of this, but I've learned something today, and I know people who are listening have as well. So thank you for being on Talking Church.
Thanks for having me.